Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Welcome to my podcast, where we are going to talk about a lifestyle with dogs and threw in a few life lessons along the way. Whether you're a hound hunter, bird dog enthusiast, running setters, pointers, retrievers, or a flat-out running dog junkie, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Heath Hyatt, a certified law enforcement canine trainer with over 3 decades of personal and professional training and handling experience. It's time for me to pay it forward. So grab your leads, lace up those boots, and come and join me on this lifelong process of teaching, training, and learning. Are you looking to unlock your dog's full potential and give them the best nutrition possible for peak performance? Then look no further. Inukshuk has what you're looking for. Inukshuk's nutrient-dense formulas are crafted to keep your dog's energy high and performance top-notch. Packed with premium proteins and essential fats, Inukshuk delivers the balanced nutrition your dog needs to thrive. From hunting dogs to police canines, Inukshuk is trusted by professionals. Give your dog the power of peak performance with Inukshuk professional dog food. All right, so it's going to be New Year's. This is going to be a New Year's release. So hope everybody had a good Christmas, and I hope everybody is going to have a great New Year, and you've got a lot of stuff planned and a lot of goals that are reachable. I've got a mess. I'll just tell you right now. So the last week of season has been tough. I've been hunting my younger dogs, and I'm going to tell you, one trash race leads to 3 trash races. So I'm up to 4 trash races right now, and I am not happy about it. So I can't wait till we get a little snow and I can get out and kind of figure out I know what's going on. You guys know that you've heard me talk that coyotes are my nemesis, and a couple of my younger dogs, we've had to really, really hunt hard to find bear. Like, we've had to hunt hard. And I've let some of my younger dogs kind of take the lead. I've kept my older dogs at the house, trying to give them, give them their time. And I want to pull what little bit of hair I have left. I just want to pull it out because I can't stand it. You don't know till you're about halfway in it, and you're like, this isn't right. Like, come on, guys, this ain't right. But being a trainer and using some common sense, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is training and using our smarts. Like, if you can't see it, you don't know. Even though that 30 plus years of hunting tells me that's not typical, I still don't go in just to stopping the dogs. I try to use my head a little bit and not do any more damage than I need to, so I don't have to go back and spend months trying to fix what I just messed up. So it's been tough. So my goals this year are to fix the mess that I've got into, get these young dogs straightened out a little bit, and hopefully this coming season will be better, because the last 2 weeks have been tough. But that's part of hunting. That's what makes us do what we do. But that's why we're going to talk about today. I've got Dan Vogt on, and Dan is from out in our one of my Dan, I have to tell you, I've been to Idaho 3 times now. 3 times now, and I could live there. Like, I could live there if it wasn't for the kids and the family. That's one of the places. Now, I've been in northern Idaho. I have been down to Boise, and I've been to I've been through that part of the country, but most of my ramblings in Idaho have been northern Idaho, up through the Bitterroot. I've been through there. I went out to Dale Cameron's and drove through that area because, you read his book, The Call of the Hounds, and you're like, he's talking about these places. And Glacier. I mean, it is so interesting that he used to be able to hunt Glacier National Park before it became that way. So anyway, I've got Dan on from Idaho. Dan is a fellow police officer. And, his story and my story is a lot of alike. I started into police work, and my hound hunting experience and me raising dogs and hunting dogs led me into my canine life. And, Dan kind of followed this his path was kind of similar. His hunting with hounds led him into canine. And you talk about, we're going to compare both worlds. We're going to talk about the hound world and the canine world. There's such a small world that even though you don't know everybody in the hound world, but you've heard the name or you've heard the bloodline that they're hunting. There's some correlation there. And the same thing goes with law enforcement. We go back to Mike Leonard. I had Mike on, I don't know, last year maybe. And, Mike and Dan know each other, and we got to talk about man tracking and search and rescue. And that's what kind of crossed mine and Dan's path through Mike, or Mike through Dan. And I don't know. It's just a small world. I don't care. Anything to do with dogs is always a small world, even though you think it's huge. There's a correlation or there's a connection. There's something there that brings you together or crosses paths with individuals. And that's what makes it so unique in a lot of ways, that you get to talk to these people, or people from across the country, or people across the world. Actually, we've been to Botswana. We've not physically been, but we talked to people in South Africa and Botswana, and we've talked to people here and talked to people there in Canada, which we spend time in Canada. But anyway, it makes it so interesting. But Dan, thank you for taking the time. I know you've been busy. We have been playing tag because you're out of pocket, or I'm spending too much time. Just like today, I spent way too much time in the woods. We could have got this done a lot sooner. We wasn't wrangling up dogs from 3 different continents. But I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on. And just before we get started, just kind of give us a rundown about you, who you are, what you do, a little bit of background into the dog world. You can start with your hounds, and then we'll work into the police dogs.
Sure. Well, my name is Dan Vogt. I live in Idaho. I was born in Alaska. My family's been in Idaho for several generations, but my parents were living up there when I was born, and from a small town, coastal. They're called Valdez, Alaska, and great place to grow up. Spent first I guess 12 years of my life, 13 years of my life there, and then we moved back to Idaho, and I've been here off and on since then. But I as far as dogs go, we had some pet dogs when I was growing up. Had some, families and neighbors that had some sled dogs up there, but, kind of got into bird dogs a little bit. And then where I was growing up and lived when I was in high school, a lot of agriculture around there, especially at that time. And there was a guy that I met and ended up working with and still friends with, a guy named Kim Leach. And Kim was really exceptional in a lot of ways, but really good with dogs, really good with horses and cattle. And anyways, I got a border collie pup from him, and Kim showed me a lot of his methods and his way of working with dogs. And then that led me to a several-year career working as a cowboy before I got into law enforcement. I worked around different parts of Idaho, ranches and feedlots, and was around a lot of different cow dogs. And then I ended up down in Arizona, and I worked on a big ranch down there. And I'd heard about lion hunting before when I was living here in Idaho, but a lot of the cowboys that I worked with and a lot of these remote ranch areas, a lot of people have hounds, and there's a lot of lion hunting going on. And so that's where I really kind of got bit with the lion hunting bug, was down there. And there's a family down there that I'm friends with, and their last name is Gould. And I've worked with Sam Gould and Cole Gould, and they're both about my age. And then their dad, Charlie Gould, was, I like to joke and say he's kind of partially responsible for my hound dog addiction. But Charlie was a lion hunter, and he was a mentor of mine. He grew up in Arizona and different states. He'd really moved around quite a bit working, but Charlie hunted with the Goswicks, and he was by the time I got my own dogs, cell phones were a thing, and Charlie was on the phone quite a bit, helping me through some of the different problems and some of the troubleshooting and that sort of thing. So that's where I got my start with hounds, was kind of through him, and I was living back in Idaho at the time, and ended up meeting some other people that were real helpful and real influential. A father and son duo, Wayne Goodwin and his son Dave Goodwin, and that's where I got my first dogs were from them, and that was kind of the start of it right there.
What line of dogs was that? What breed? I know you don't have to tell me exactly, but what was it? Blue ticks, walkers, English, mixed? What were you?
Yeah, so those were walkers, and Wayne had he had a line of dogs that were walker dogs, but he'd had these dogs for quite a while, and Wayne was really obsessed with bobcat dogs. Now, he hunted everything else, but that was really his real love, was a good bobcat dog. And so the first pups that I got from them were actually a female that he had named Casey, that she was a really good bobcat dog. And then Dave had a dog at the time that had come from back east and was a son of Nocturnal Nailer. So it was, these pups were grand pups of Nocturnal Nailer on the top, and then Wayne Goodwin's old line of walker dogs on the bottom. And I don't really know exactly how they were bred, but they were cat dogs.
So Nailer, yeah. So I've had several dogs that are heavy Nailer bred. I don't think currently, most of my dogs now are kind of mixed up. Of course, we've talked, most of my dogs are coming out of the Kemp line. I have some of my old original stock, which is, actually they were half black and tan, half Walker cross. And on the Walker side, it had House's Bali, and then you go back to my old male dog, and he had some Lipper cross in him. But yeah, Nailer shows up a lot in dogs, so that's kind of curious that the guys out there were actually using that. I mean, they had big mouths on them, big blanket backs. So interesting.
Yeah, they were. Those dogs, I don't know if there's a lot of Nailer blood still around here, or if people are kind of gone on to other things, or maybe some of the, the more famous dogs that you see up close on some pedigrees, if you were to trace it back, if they still go to Nailer or not. But I know at that time, early 2000s, that was a pretty popular strain. But I haven't really kept up too much with the Walker blood. I've got some friends that still hunt some Walkers, and there's, I don't know how big of a distinction, but it seems like there's, somewhat of a distinction with, there's some strains of dogs that are out here that are, mainly used on big game, and they get, bred with other dogs that are here hunting big game, and you don't really see a lot of famous coon dogs up close in their pedigrees. But then I know some of these guys that are hunting Walkers here on big game are still tapping back into some of that, more famous, current, models of, different dogs that are winning in the coon world, and then adding that to their blood that they're hunting on big game here.
Yeah, I guess if you really look at it, I mean, all of our dogs somehow originated from some type of coon hound type or bloodline dog. I mean, they most of them, not all, but most. I mean, you can say they're big game bred, but if you go back far enough for a pedigree, you're going to find some of those, like you said, some of those famous bloodlines of some certain breed.
Yeah, I know that there's obviously common ancestors. You hear new blood, or you hear old blood, and if you think about it, every dog living today had ancestors that was alive thousands of years ago. So I don't know what's new and old. I guess it just kind of depends on whether there were famous dogs that people know in the pedigree. Sometimes that maybe is the distinction when, in the lingo, when people talk about new versus old blood. But you're 100% right. They all have common ancestors. So,
well, I mean, I had a guy. So one of the guys that hunt with me, that we were talking about some of the bloodline that I still have, which I've got one Gyp that goes back to my old stuff, and she's a granddaughter. And he was asking me about one of the females that was in that pedigree, which I owned her, and I give him. I still have the papers where she passed, and then I bred her, and I bred her to my Sackett dog, my Sackett Junior dog, and she had one pup this time, and we coon hunted him until he was like 3 years old. And then I switched him over and started bear hunting him, and he made a phenomenal bear dog. Phenomenal. And that was the Sackett cross back on her, but she was out of Finley, was not directly. Her granddad was Finley River Nighthawk, which was a world champion. And when I told him that, he was like, "You're really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, that's the line that these dogs go back to. If you're looking at Sackett on the top, Sackett Junior, my male was directly out of Sackett Junior. And then, her granddad was Finley River Nighthawk. And he was like, "Man," he's like, "I didn't realize that you were carrying that," which I know that's old stuff now. I mean, like you said, back in the early 2000s, that's old stuff compared to what I used to keep up with those bloodlines, Dan, but I know my stuff, but I don't know these new dogs. You could tell me what they are, and I'm like, okay, I don't know. But
sure.
Anyway, it's kind of irrelevant. Well, let's get into the it brought you. So the hounds brought you into the canine world. Tell us how that evolved, and then we'll start picking into some training.
Sure. Well, the department that I work at has a canine unit, and there's constantly ebbs and flows of people that either decide to move on or promote or go to a different assignment or something like that, and I got asked to join that unit, and I had just bred a female hound of mine at the time, and I didn't want to get involved. I wanted to focus on those pups and all that. And anyways, they had a few other things change in the unit, and some people go into some different places, and they asked again. And so I decided to give it a whirl. And that was 2010. And the dog that I got was already he was 4, and he was already a certified dog with a different handler. I still had to get my training hours in before we could hit the street, but he had been a titled KNPV dog overseas, and then we had purchased him from a vendor here in the States, and that era of dogs, at least for us around here, there was some pretty sharp dogs, and there were some dogs with a lot of baggage. Definitely high drive dogs that you didn't have to make excuses for as far as whether or not they were going to perform. But they had a lot of, extra stuff that, at the time I thought, well, this is just how these dogs are. And then as I was exposed to more things, I found out that you don't have to put up with some of the things that we were putting up with, and you could still have a dog that would go and do its job and perform. And so I was definitely a lot more choosy and selective on the second dog. On the first dog, I just handled what they gave me, but I got to be involved with selecting some dogs later on and selecting my second dog.
And both of those were dual purpose.
Correct.
Dogs. Yeah, I was going to say I didn't remember. I thought you'd had 2 dogs. I thought that's what you had told me, that you had 2. So, all right. So this is where my world changed. This is where the kind of the light bulb went off. So I got my first hound in 94, and from 94 to 2005. Because that's when I got my first police canine, was spring of 2005. I'd been in law enforcement about 18 months. I got in 2003. And I still didn't know a hill of beans about police stuff, police canine training. Like, I knew dog behavior because you and I get to see our dogs perform. And I think you and I have had this actually kind of conversation. We get to see dogs do stuff that non-hound hunters, dog owners, and I don't care if that's in the law enforcement world or the sport world or whatever it is, we see our dogs do some amazing things in the hunting world, and their endurance, their ability, their drives, their stamina. Like, we can go through the whole long list of things, but I was able to start learning body language of the dog. That's what that first 10 years done for me. And looking back at it now, I really, that's what got me into the law enforcement side. I don't think I'm saying that right. The reason that I got law enforcement because I had hounds and they thought I knew what I was doing. Little did they know, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just taking dogs and hunting them. But while I was hunting them, I was actually learning their language. There we go. That's how to say it. And in 2005, I started training, but it wasn't until about the same time as you, Dan, about 2010, when I started going to some classes. And 2013 was and that's only been 11 years ago, getting ready to be 12 years, going to be 12 years ago. It wasn't until 2010 that I started like really, really questioning my training techniques, which were very little. It was the old school style, right? You get me. And then in 2013, sitting through some classes and being able to watch them shape behavior, and we talk about, the Nipopo. I had Randall Likens on here a couple weeks ago talking about Nipopo, and start to learn, like the B.F. Skinner and the Pavlov theories and operant conditioning and the 4 quadrants. It was like mind blowing to me that you can do certain things and you can get a dog to comply with you without using much, if any, negative punishment, and they enjoy doing what they do. That was like, I mean, it was an aha moment for me. I mean, I've said it on here before, sitting in St. Louis, sitting in a class with Laz Cabrero and watching him work a dog and watching him. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy's like, he's a genius. But I just hadn't been exposed to it. People are way ahead of me. But so you getting into that and you going to some trainings, kind of tell me your experience and if it changed your thought process or training, what you do.
Well, one thing that I guess I'll add with that is there's a whole nother side to the training, and that's the horse training side of things. and that's been a big part of my life. I spent years making my living on the back of a horse, and then I worked as a horseshoer and still own horses and breed and raise and train them. And so that's a passion of mine, but there's some really interesting people in the horse training world. Now there's obviously there's some gimmicks out there and there's stuff like that, but there's some people that, the Dorrances come to mind, Bill and Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt. And then there's a lot of people that they influenced, and you could go, several different generations if you want to into this. And these guys were really big on the psychology of it. And I've had this conversation with some of the canine trainers that I worked with. I was a certified trainer, and then of course we're constantly always training our own dogs and getting exposed to that stuff. But I know there's differences in the fact that a horse is a prey animal and a dog is a predator. And not saying that the similarities are just there, but I guess in the similarities in the way that you present yourself to the animal, and then some of the thought process that goes into the training. And so I was already thinking about that, and the horse world can definitely be really humbling. I mean, you can think that you know something about it, and then you are around some people that are just on a completely different level. And then you have some of them share with you just some of the little things that they're feeling and that they're looking at, and some of the things that they're aware of as far as the horse goes. And so my mind was already kind of wired that way. And when I got into some of the the professional canine training side of things, I was happy to see that there were some people that were aware of some of these things that maybe were going on with a dog, instead of just a simple, one size fits no one approach where it's, do step 1 through 17. And that's exactly how you do it every time, instead of, taking into consideration where the dog is now. And there's a friend of mine, Drew Elsner, and he talks about this, not to steal this from him, but to give him credit. He talks about with horses about rising to the occasion and rising up to the level of maybe where a horse is, instead of trying to drag them down to your level. And so I've always tried to better myself and be aware of some of these different things that are maybe going on with a horse or with a dog, or maybe with the horse dog. I guess the similarities, but how the human interacts with them and where that goes and where that takes you.
Yeah, I did not remember. I could not remember his name, and I know I said it on here, and I kind of watched it before. But Monty Roberts, you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
The Horse Whisperer. Right. I think he was the first actual one. I went to Lexington, me, my dad, my sister. My sister's still a big horse person. Like they run the rodeo circuit here, not like what you guys have out west. But my nephew, I mean, he's roping and they call it shoot dogging or whatever at this point.
Okay.
But anyway, we went and watched that Monty, and they brought basically a wild horse in, and I mean, by the end of the seminar, he had a saddle on it, was on top of it, and everybody was like, and this was probably back in the early 90s. Yeah, this had to be 89. It had to be 90. It was late 80s, early 90s. And, I sat there and I watched that. And I have to say, it took me years, 15 more years to understand what was taking place. I seen what he was doing. I understand that. I way more understand it now, but it just did not. It did not factor in because we're looking at a horse that this is going to be applied to a dog.
Sure.
All the things that we talk about can be applied to different animals. I mean, you see the guys using the clicker training because clicker. You and I know clicker. It's a bridge and it's a marker and blah 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 blah. They use clicker training for chickens. I mean, if you can get a chicken to do something, you can do just about anything, right?
Sure.
But
well, you along those same lines, you look at. I mean, there's people training horses, but there's people doing it a wide variety of different ways, just like there is with dogs. And a guy that I tracked with a lot, but then we also trained with him in some canine SWAT integration stuff, and I don't know if you know Vince Bingaman at all from Phoenix, but he mentioned to me one time when we were talking about some training, he said, you don't see people with pinch collars working with Bengal tigers, like Siegfried and Roy, those guys in Vegas with the tigers, or back when they used to do that, they're not out there with a pinch collar, yanking on these tigers' necks. I mean, there's a different, different philosophy that goes into some of that to try to accomplish your goals.
Yeah. So you went to some trainings. You was a canine handler, 2 dogs. You got to help pick your second dog and do more of your style of training than what you were allowed the first time because you didn't know. How has that has it played a factor in how you do things with your dogs now? And if so, what is that?
Sure. Well, I think one of the most important things with either discipline, whether it's in the police dog side of things or the hound dog side of things, is the selection. And on the hound side of things, I'm not out purchasing made dogs or anything like that. And so you're selecting bloodlines and you're selecting puppies, and then you're through that you're deciding what dogs you're going to keep and go the distance with. In the police dog side of things, I couldn't overemphasize how important dog selection is, and having maybe a good relationship with the vendor if you know them and can trust them, but then also with the selection test that you go through, because ultimately you're going to end up selecting something, and then you want that something that you select to be an animal that you could put the couple months of initial training on, and then you're going to go out on the street and work with this dog for 8 or 10 years, and that's too long of a time to be with the wrong dog. And so I think the selection is huge, and I guess that's why I analyze my own dogs, maybe sometimes overthink it, but I think the selecting either the bloodlines themselves or the individual dogs ultimately, that's a huge thing right there. But I guess I have a little different understanding of dogs now than I did 20 years ago, and but evaluating them for what they are. I don't believe that you can add or subtract any of these drives to a dog. You can enhance or diminish them maybe a little bit, but you can't add or subtract them. And you kind of get what you get when the sperm hits the egg at the moment of conception with that individual. And so knowing that, that's where that selection is huge. But then kind of along the lines of what we were also talking about, with some of the personality traits, of these dogs. I don't really think those personality traits are something that you can really change either. Those seem to kind of be hardwired into a dog, and again, 10 years is a long time to have one that's not going to suit you or not exactly what you're looking for, and so the selection of them seems to be huge, but then also the evaluation of them and the real honest look at them, and I guess being honest with yourself as far as what they are, and then just understanding maybe what you can fix and what you can tolerate and what you can put up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeremy Moore and I did a podcast on, do you like your dog? Because you're right. I have gotten rid of some really nice dogs, productive wise, like doing their job, but I couldn't stand some of the nonsense. And we're going to talk about that because that was one of the things that we were talking about. Like, maybe the kennel manners or just the hecticness, chaos they cause, or stuff like that, for me, like what is my, like, what is your cutoff? Like, what are you going to do? But anyway, talking about what you're saying, if you're raising a dog, which I'm trying to do most of mine now, I have got a couple dogs that people have given me to hunt or, to try. And I do like, the two dogs that I've gotten right now. Both of them so far, their personalities are really good, and we're meshing. Now, I don't know as they mature if that's going to change, because, that's one of the things in the police world too that kind of crept up on me is, the different stages of a dog, and, from puppy stage to that adolescent to that adult, like, dogs change, especially your male dogs more so. I don't see it as much in the females. I see it more in the males. When that testosterone starts to drop, that's when you get have some of the problems. But yeah, personality is huge. And another thing that we had talked about before, and I want to pick your brain about it, is like the trainability. Like, I know in the police, the canine world, like, I have dealt with dogs that you can show them, run them through a scenario or two, and you don't have to ever go back. Boom, you move on to the next thing. And then I even had one of the dogs was actually mine, and I hated it. That you could take that scoundrel out and show him something, and next week you had to go back out and show him the same thing. Sure. that trainability, like, he just did not. His short-term memory was good. His long-term memory, non-existent.
Right. So is that intelligence? Is that, IQ, if you want to call it that? Or is that, a trainability thing? Obviously we're not giving them, IQ tests or SAT exams or anything like that. But, there are some dogs who definitely seem like they're smarter and they're more trainable. Sometimes that's a good thing, and then other times you've got to watch out for the unintended consequences with those hyper trainable dogs. They can learn bad habits. Sometimes they're really sensible or sensitive to those little things, and so I guess it depends on how aware you are of things and what you're looking for there. Are the really trainable dogs, are they more likely to get whipped off a bad bear? Are the really trainable dogs, are they easier to trash break and keep trash broke? These are all questions that run around in my head. I know that with some of these things, for example, like in the police dog world, you worry about, what if your dog is biting a suspect and somebody uses a taser at the same time. And, some dogs, I could see that having a real negative effect on that dog, engaging with a suspect later on. But with other dogs, I don't think it would matter at all, because they're maybe hard-headed enough, or they've got a durable enough of a personality that doesn't matter. And you look at some of the dogs out there that have to constantly be reminded what being trash broke is, and other dogs get it really quick. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I got a couple examples that I can actually talk about. So I've got a male dog here who is, and I say this all the time, he's rattle-headed. I think you and I have actually had this conversation. He's kind of rattle-headed. And that rattle-headedness, now, to me, he's kind of goofy sometimes. As he has matured, he's gotten better. He's not 3 yet, but his year-old to 2-year-old, like, I'm like, why am I keeping this dog? But every time that I said that, the scoundrel ended up doing something that was like, well, how did you pull that off? Just enough, like keep him around. And now he's a pretty solid dog. But I think that knuckleheadedness, that's the better knucklehead.
Sure.
That it's actually played into his favor. Now, when I say that, he's not hard to handle. He's not, he barked, he was a little loose mouth. And that was the conversation you and I had about him. He was a little loose mouth at the house. He whined and whimpered and done some, foolish stuff. But like I said, as he's gotten older, when he got to that 24 months, like I said, he's over 2 now, like it kind of just really went away. And I thought about a conversation that I'd had with somebody else. I think it was Randall, actually, on his podcast that I did with him. Like, he was kind of that borderline. Like, he's either going to fall off and be, like, intolerable, but he didn't. He stayed right on the line, and he's kind of fell the other way where he's not. He's like, no. But back to let's talk. You hit 2 points there that I really, really want to kind of dive into. Smart dogs not getting hurt, especially when we're hunting the stuff that you and I hunt. And dogs that are hard-headed, stubborn, in my experience, are the ones that they stay longer. You've got to physically go catch them off a game, which that's kind of what I prefer. But I don't want the secondary baggage that comes with them. Is they're usually the ones that do end up getting hurt somehow, some way, or they end up in a predicament that they shouldn't be in. Where versus the smart dog that kind of stays out of the way, does its thing, you don't end up with some of that extra chaos. That's what we'll call it, extra chaos. So I have had dogs in my career. I had a dog named Jimmy, a Walker dog, and she was as good as dog as any that I've owned. She wasn't a superstar, and she definitely was not the low rung on the totem pole. Caught numerous bear. But if a bear got rough when she was younger, she'd leave it. And when I say rough, I mean running dogs, not just walking and baying. But as she got older, and of course, you didn't know this until we got Garmin's, and she was in that transition. We went from the beep telemetry to the Garmin's. I would have never really known it without the Garmin. As she got older, you'd see her start making those big, wide circles around if it got rough. She got to the point where she wasn't leaving, but she wasn't in there with the other dogs either. So I've asked myself numerous times, I've had this conversation in my head, like, you get rid of, most people would probably just get rid of a dog like that, like, boom. But the 1 or 2 bear a year, or a bear or 2 every other year that ended up being that way, didn't compare to the other 40 or 50 that she was treeing and catching.
Right.
So for me, I didn't like it. I did not like it, but it didn't. She was a good enough dog that I didn't overlook that stuff. I let that go. If that answers what you're saying.
Sure. It was tolerable enough, I guess. And and one of the concerns I would have if I was bear hunting and I had a dog that was like that is, and if, well, I'll back this up. So when I started bear hunting, I had dogs that could catch bears that wanted to be caught. Bears, they'd run, but the ones that we tended to tree were not the really bad bears. And I think some of the trouble that we had with catching those bad ones, maybe we would have one dog that was, kind of the caliber that you really wanted, and then the other dogs that lacked the speed to stay with them, or lacked the grit to stay there on the bad ones, where that one dog would find himself alone with some of those bears, and then self-preservation kicks in, and so some of those bears weren't getting caught. Now I've got friends now that hunt bears, and their focus, as professional bear hunters, guiding, working with outfitters, is dogs that will not leave a bad bear, and they've got strains of dogs that won't do that. But I would be concerned with a dog like what you were describing. Is she going to take maybe a young, influential dog with her? How much of that would maybe go on, versus dogs that are going to hang with that bad bear? Are the younger, influential dogs going to be more likely to stick in there, or is it going to be like an individual choice, and maybe it doesn't matter? I think some of the pack dynamics do influence that.
You say that, and I have got rid of some couple dogs for backtracking really bad, going into the tree, pulling young dogs off the tree. Then now that you said that, it was a perfect timing, because I only had 3 or 4 dogs at the time. They were all mature dogs that had plenty of experience, and she did not affect them. But a young dog, absolutely. Like, I can see that happening. And I guess if I would have seen that happening, it may have changed my mind, actually. Like the dogs that, the 2 dogs that's coming to my mind about backtracking off a tree, they were literally taking my younger dogs away. And I said, that's got to stop. Like, that's got to stop. Can't happen.
Right. And I guess there's a couple different sides of that coin, right? There's the philosophy of, you want dogs that are good and in spite of you, not because of you. But then we also all know the benefit of having, that pup trainer kind of dog. I mean, that dog, having a made pack of dogs that you can plug in young dogs to, there's definitely the benefit of that. So, those are the two sides of that. Is I think there definitely is some learned behavior that could come from that, and then maybe the real rock star kind of dog, even when they are young, they're going to kind of do what they're going to do. But I think somewhere in there is the answer, and I guess we also you want to try to give every young dog a fair shake. And I definitely don't want to have my young dogs exposed to bad habits, at least on a repetitive standpoint, to where that's going to really start shaping them.
Yeah. So back to the trainability. Like, natural dogs are just easy. Dogs that are naturals, all you got to do is put them in the woods, expose them to what you want them to do, and de-expose them to the things you don't want them to do. Like you don't have to do nothing. You just turn them loose, let them go. And they, like you said, they're already genetically programmed to do it, and they do it. And the only thing you have to do is correct them off the wrong game. Most of the time. I know there's some other stuff there, but let's go a little bit deeper than that. Let's go with a well-rounded hound. The dogs that load and lead, and you can walk out of the woods without a lead and not just let them run amok, let them do what they want to do. No, you come here, stay with me. We got 2 miles to get back to the truck, and I don't want you running off. Versus, we're going into the woods hunting. You guys are free. You can do what you want to do, and I'll pick you up at the tree or wherever you're at. Like the training of the dog.
So as far as the training goes, I hunt my dogs. I free cast them a lot. And, the more I hunt them, the better their handle is, the more I'm using them. I try to hunt a horseback as much as I can, but there's some country that, isn't, real suitable for that. Sometimes it's, too many fences that get in the way. Other times it's, the terrain or here where I'm at, I'm kind of in a deserty part of Idaho, but we still are in Idaho, so we get some snow. But I find my dogs, handle a lot better, the more free cast type hunting that I'm doing. And I prefer a dog that, gets along with that style of hunting. But I know they handle a lot better with more use. But there are some dogs, there's some differences just within the dogs. And there are some dogs, and I think it's getting back more into what we were earlier talking about with the personalities. You can have litter mates, for example, that display different personalities. You can have, they've had the exact same environmental exposure. If you want to start getting into the nature versus nurture argument, and you have these two litter mates, and say if you wanted to get after them for nuisance barking, you could have one dog that you just barely raise your voice and look at them wrong, and it's the end of the world to that dog. And then you can have another dog that, you could be out there trying to rough them up with a newspaper or something like that and scolding them and swatting on them with that. And he's going to be wagging his tail and jumping on you and think that you're playing with him, and just absolutely love it. And not be deterred at all. But if you treated that other dog the same way, it would just melt that dog's, psyche. And so I like a sensitive dog. I like a dog that's, aware of, whether it's little voice inflection or whether it's, look at the tone that we use, with these e-collars or with, these GPS collars. There's different dogs have different reactions to that. And then, little things that make a big difference to one dog is completely lost or wasted on another dog. They just kind of beat or tick differently. But I do enjoy a sensitive dog, but I don't want them so sensitive that, just the normal everyday thing with a hunt or with whatever we're doing. I don't want that to be so much that they're so fragile and that's melting them down, if that makes sense.
Oh no, absolutely. No. And is that something that you picked up just from hound hunting, or did that come from some of your canine training through your seminars and stuff like that? How did that?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of chicken versus egg. I was aware of some of these things, but just the more exposure that I got in it, the more aware of it I was, I guess. But the cow dogs and then the hound dogs were kind of the progression of it. Some of this I was aware of with the cow dogs, with border collies, for example. Really smart, really intelligent dogs. I've seen it written. I don't know if it's true, but they claim that they rank those dogs as the most intelligent dog out there. At least they did when I saw a list on that. And so they're a really smart dog, and you've got to be careful with how you interact with them. If you were a really, if you were heavy-handed, or if you were a really loud kind of person, maybe that type of personality wouldn't really mesh well with those dogs. And so those dogs were really sensitive. And then, like I said, going back to the horses, the horses are very sensitive. I've heard it said, they can, and it's true. I've observed it, but in talking with their sensitivity to training, I didn't make this up. I'm still in it, but that they can feel a fly land on them in a windstorm. That's how sensitive they are, even more so than that. But you look at these border collies, and they'll quit you if you're too heavy-handed with them. And I'm not talking about beating on them, but if you're just kind of a real ram and jam, rough and gruff, kind of person. And so the border collies don't fit a lot of people. And some people like them crossed. The one cow dog that I have now, he's a crossbred dog. He's got some border collie, and he's got some Kelpie, and he's got some other stuff in him, but he's more of a durable type of a personality compared to, the border collies. And I guess going back into the hounds, because that's what this is really about. I enjoy a dog that, just a little inflection in your voice that they realize that, hey, you're telling them to hush and be quiet. Where some dogs, it just seems like that's completely wasted on them. And I feel like a dog that is in tune with the handler or with the hunter to where whether it's voice inflection or whether it's the trash breaking methods that you go through, it seems like you can get a dog that's trash broke, and you can get a dog that is quiet in the kennel when they're supposed to be, or maybe quiet in the box when they're supposed to be, and ultimately it's a more enjoyable dog to be around.
Yeah, I preach it all the time. Like, the more time you spend with your dogs in the off season, doing the little things, the 5 minutes a day, the more pleasurable they are to be around in hunting season. And it just makes the whole experience better because you're not stressed out. You're not, constantly aggravated or upset at what the dog's doing or not doing. So, yeah, I completely understand that.
I've got a question for you about your bear dogs, and you mentioned, some trash issues. Do you have more of an emphasis on your bear dogs not leaving a bad bear now than you used to when you started?
I didn't know better then. I had, I didn't have no money, and what I had was what I had, and that's how it went. Like, it wasn't a whole lot of options there. I don't know. I don't know that I have more emphasis on it. I don't want my dogs getting tore up. Mm-hmm. I don't. And I want them to stay. Like, if it's a bad, mean bear, like, y'all need, just like you're talking about, they need to be like a cattle dog. I want them to surround it and bark until I get there. And if he starts scattering and running dogs, I really haven't. I mean, I've had a couple of those, but not horrible. Like, and again, most of the time there's only 4 or 5 dogs, 6 dogs on it. So it's not a pile where they can't get out of the way and they can't do some other things. But I don't know that I have more of an emphasis on it. My expectation is to stay no matter how bad it gets. But I also have a little bit of mercy too. Like where are you at? Like, a couple of my young dogs this training season got bit and beat up a little bit because that was their first one. You know how that is. Like, and I do believe in monkey see, monkey do. My older dogs, Kate likes to get right up in her face, and she always comes out with some type of bite, scratch, tear, something on a bear like that. Spook basically stays out of the way, keeps his distance, but he don't leave. And I hope the younger dogs pay attention to that. But we did have one bear that got a little rough, and my younger dogs, and I'm like, all right, so my next question is, are they going back the next time? Like, okay, what's going to happen the next time? And no issues, no problems, went right back. But they didn't get ground and pounded either. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like an MMA match, but yeah, my expectations are to stay. I can't say that my emphasis is any stronger or any less, because back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I just had the dogs that I had is what I hunted. I didn't have many options. That's it. And they, I can probably say that they were probably a little bit more, they were different dogs than what I have now.
Okay. So what would, I guess from a trash breaking or a trustworthiness standpoint, because are you rigging your dogs when you're hunting them? Is that how you're getting tracks going?
We do both.
Okay.
August.
Ultimately, you've got to trust them at some point that, hey, this dog's got it and he's not lying to me, right? And that's one thing that I've wondered. You see some dogs that, I mean, even as they're kind of sliding into the the golden years of their life, can you really trust them? And then there's other dogs that seem like they're pretty trustworthy early on, and then they continue to just prove their trustworthiness. And I was having a conversation about this with a friend of mine recently, and he catches a lot of bears, but he was telling me that these dogs, if they don't get after a bear, they're likely to want to get after a coyote. And I was asking him, the dogs that he has today compared to the dogs that he had, 15, 20 years ago. And I've hunted with both packs, were the dogs of yesterday that he had. And I'm not talking like the good old days that maybe some old guy remembers, but just, as we're looking at, different styles of dogs, were they, once you got them trash broke, could you maybe not get after a bear for a week or something like that, and not have any of the trustworthy issues and have to worry about them getting after a coyote, or can you trash break them and they stay broke? That sort of thing. And those are some of the questions I have running around in my head right now.
Yeah, well, and those are really good. And one of the differences that I see, so I will say that I had a little blue female named Belle that was she was a Cameron bred female. She come from Dale. Has probably been the straightest, and I'm not saying she was broke straight, because I have a hard time believing that any dog is perfect. But she has been one of the straightest dogs. Now, when she was 2 years old, she'd run the hair off anything that moved. And I mean, run the hair off of it. But once I got her stopped, she, like, if she opened her mouth, you were more likely going to see a bear. But back then, we didn't have the amount of coyotes that we have now. You never seen a coyote. You hardly ever seen a coyote track. And I went up a holler last week with snow on. 4 yotes had covered 3.5 miles running up the road together. And I believe there's more opportunity now. So that's one of the differences I see. And to relate to your other question about, some dogs more trustworthy than others. Yeah, if you go a week or two without hitting a bear track, which is very unlikely right now with the population, we're probably going to get back to that here shortly, but that's a whole nother podcast. But I've got a couple dogs that you could probably hunt them 2 weeks and not run nothing, and you'd still probably be okay. But, and again, I got to preface this, but, my older dogs are 5 and everything else is under 4. And for me, it's that 4 and 5 when they really start like, okay, this is going to be 98% where you should be at. Especially with the amount of season that we have and the allotted time that we have to hunt here in Virginia. It makes it really tough to finish out a dog any faster than that. Now, we're talking about Virginia, not talking about other places that can hunt year round in longer seasons, because that changes things. But I've got a couple young dogs, just like what we're talking. You hunt them 3 or 4 days in a row and they ain't running something, they're going to find something to run. And I do not like that. I don't like it. I've said this 100 times and people think I'm crazy. If I take a 9-mile walk like I did Tuesday, actually it was 13.3 miles Tuesday. If you ain't hitting a bear track, I don't want to hear your mouth. Like, that's how I feel.
Sure.
And I did. I had a couple dogs get off and start trailing up a holler and crossed over in the south and got under a bunch of rocks, and they run out the rocks and went way out the mountain and turn and come back. Typically, that's how a bear runs. If it was a deer, they'd have broke off the mountain. And deer's easy. If my dogs run deer, I don't want that, first of all. And I usually do a lot of proofing on that. But I do expect it. I had one last Friday that broke off and run a deer, and he's only 2. But he shouldn't have done that, and I've got a grip on it. But it run like a bear, but I don't think it was a bear because they didn't come up with nothing. And to me, and my standards and my expectations are, I know that you're going to get outrun. I know that things are going to happen where you don't catch bear every time you go. That's just the way it is. But if you're opening your mouth and you're running, I expect to see the results way more than I don't see the results, which means I either want to see the bear crossing, I want to see it on the ground, you got it caught, or I want to see it in a tree. Sure. So anyway, I've got a couple right now that are testing Heath's patience. And again, I'm the type of person, and I've learned this through canine training, and it's kind of what we're talking about. Like, if I don't know 100%, if I can't see it with my own eyes, I don't go to applying a bunch of pressure. That's me. I want to set that scenario up like we do in our controlled environments when we're training, right?
Sure.
Like, I don't want any questions when I go to applying pressure. So I want to see it, know it's there, give the dogs the opportunity to make a decision. Yes, I'm going to run it, or no, I'm not going to run it. And if you are going to run it, okay, well, I'm going to give you a little bit of, reason why not to run it. So I don't like the unknown. For me, and I think that's from training in controlled environments so much has changed some of my philosophy on, even on the track breaking. It's like proofing. We run a car, we're running narcotics on a car, and the dog alerts on the car. You don't find any narcotics. Okay. Then I start going through there and saying, okay, what was in this car? Is this something that I see in training? And I just give you a quick example, just like the Swiss or sweets. What's everybody stuffing that with? Right.
So
we proof off Swiss or Sweets. I want to know when that dog hits on a Swiss or Sweet, it was loaded with something else, right? And I feel the same way in my trash breaking or proofing, however you want to call it. But yeah, I think right now we've got a lot more opportunity where I'm at to run off game. The coyotes have exploded. Deer is easy. Like I said, there's so many deer. When I pull out every morning out of my driveway, there's anywhere from 8 to 10, 12, 15 deer standing in the field right here in front of my house. So that's not a problem. But I do have some young dogs that you give them a couple of days of not keeping them busy, they're going to find something to keep themselves busy. That's self-gratification.
Sure. Well, and there's, getting back to the philosophy of use, I want to be able to trust my dogs. And to me, it's not acceptable, at a certain age, whatever that is, for a dog not to be trustworthy. And I want them to be, as straight and true as I can, especially if I'm, hunting on bare ground and you don't sometimes have a complete picture of what's going on like you might in the snow. And so back to the philosophical differences, you could have the idea that, I'm going to prevent, these trash races from happening by not turning the dog loose unless I'm 100% sure. But then, the dog doesn't also have the opportunity to make the mistake and then learn from it. And but it comes down to your knowledge and whether whether they're doing the right or wrong thing, or maybe if it's an unknown and you're deciding not to apply anything to them, stimulation wise. But ultimately, I want them to be trainable enough that I can achieve that. And I had a really the coldest nosed dog that I've had was a dog named Shirley. And Shirley was, the best lion dog that I've had. And she was a super busy hunter. And she couldn't help it if she got into some quail or got into some other stuff like that, to where you could hear a little bit of a high pitch, kind of just a little excitement out of her. But it was different than when she struck a lion track. And so I guess that's, up to me to interpret that and to know that, hey, that's just her excited because she was just excited that she was smelling something, and she wasn't barking on it, but it was kind of almost an excited whimper kind of a sound, if she was smelling, some fresh game birds or something like that. But I knew the difference when she struck a lion track. But with the pack of dogs I had at that time, we definitely struck tracks that, we couldn't catch that lion. But with some of the other dogs that I had, I knew if they opened on it as well, that we had a pretty good track going. And, it was all part of the, I guess, being the human behind the pack, knowing what you're maybe wasting your time on some of these old tracks. But there were some times we didn't have any other tracks to run, so that's what we were going to work on that day. But with her, she was such a busy hunter that she was going to try to find something to do, but yet she was trainable enough that I didn't have to worry about her getting into trouble, running trash or trailing on coyotes or whatever after a certain point. But she was always hustling for a track, nonstop hustling for a track. And so you had to really kind of watch her. And I guess it kind of back to the be careful what you wish for. I wanted colder nosed and colder nose and colder nose and colder nose. And then all of a sudden I had this dog, and not only was she cold nosed, but she was super busy and, was really fast on tracks that she could be fast on. But she was just such a busy hunter that like her work ethic, I mean, she was always finding stuff. And there for a while, it wasn't always the right stuff, but she did achieve that trustworthy, status later on. But it just, the measuring stick of how old is this track, that was always the big question.
Yeah. And, you're saying give her the opportunity to make those mistakes. And if I've got a 2-year-old dog that I've done very, very little trash breaking with, my method and my level of enforcement is going to be way different than a 4 or 5-year-old dog that's been through it 2 or 3 times and decides to take a hiatus on his own.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I remember something from a psychology class that I had, and I forgot what the I guess what the the psychological name for it is, but there's something in there that if an animal gets poisoned by, say, a certain type of a plant, then they don't want to eat that plant again. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
Well, they were explaining it to us like that. There's something that I don't know if all animals have this or not, but I believe they do, to where animals in the wild they maybe learn that, hey, I had a bad reaction to this, and so I don't want to eat this again. It'll make them I guess deterred by it, that not want to taste that. And at the time I was sitting there in that class, and it reminded me of some of my younger foolish days where I drank too much peppermint schnapps one time, and I got sick off of that. And after that, I couldn't smell mint or taste mint, like mint gum or the mint toothpaste or anything like that. And I wanted to puke. And I've thought about that with with the trash breaking. If you could make it to where obviously you want to have the dog not start puking or anything like that when they smell a coyote or a deer, but I want them to have a lasting kind of a memory to, hey, this is bad stuff and this over here is good stuff. And obviously timing's huge on that, like you said, whether it's a young dog or an old dog or whatever. But I want it to be that lasting type of an effect where the the smell or the taste of mint or the smell or the taste of a coyote is, hey, that's no good and it's never going to be good. And then you start getting into different philosophies with dog training, where some people are like, oh, let them run trash and let them do all of that, and then you can break them off of that stuff and have them just focus on what you want to. And again, that's a whole different philosophy. And maybe with one strain of dogs, that one style works, and with another strain of dogs, it doesn't work as well. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I had that. I literally had that conversation with myself here last 2 weeks ago about my young dogs. I've been pretty tight on them as far as letting them, like I've kept them under control pretty tight, not letting them run off game, and got them on a few bear and then worked them on some deer. And I don't know if I've helped them or hindered them. Like, I feel like I've hindered them. I've free casted them a lot. Like, I let them go, and they've yet to take a track and take it on by themselves. And most young dogs that want to run, they going to pick up something, right or wrong, and run it. Like, and all the dogs that I've had have done that. And this bunch is not. And I'm like, maybe I should have balanced that a little bit more and not, maybe. And I wasn't hard on them. I was just consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of questioning, the next time I do this with another pup or pups or litter or whatever I do I back off a little bit? Or is it just, like you said, is it just their personality? Is it just their nature? They're not going to do it. And if they're not going to do it, then I need to think about, is this dog going to suit me? But anyway, that's kind of talking about what you're saying is, I wasn't heavy-handed for sure. But I was very consistent about providing them opportunities to run deer. And now they'll run a bear. Like, they'll go on a bear. That's not the issue. But usually when you're letting a year-old dog go every day that you hunt, sooner or later they going to run something they shouldn't.
Sure.
And I've just not had that. So I don't
know if your bears, if they tend to be where the other game is, but I know our lions, for example, they tend to be where the game's at. And some of the places, if you were to think, well, if you look at it through the eyes of a deer hunter and think, well, where would I go try to find a deer right now? And I'm not saying that every one of those spots has a lion in it, but a lot of the places that we do find lion sign, and it's in those places where the game is. Definitely in the wintertime, when things are condensed more on a winter range type of a setup, you've got to have a trash broke dog if you're going to be free casting in there. But then even if you're going to be turning your dog loose on tracks, you've got to have a trash broke dog, because they're gonna ultimately be trailing through a winter range area where there's a higher density of deer and elk, and so that's constantly something that we're dealing with. But to wrap it all back up, I want that trainable dog that can someday get to that trustworthy status, to where that you can trust them, whether they haven't had a lion track in a couple of weeks, or whether they just ran one yesterday. Off game, it definitely gets you in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it puts you where you don't need to be and puts you out of everything else. So you spend half the day trying to round up dogs, and it's not good. So, Dan, before we wrap this up, anything you want to leave us with about training, trainability, anything that you learned from the canine part of it that you're applying that you think people should know?
Well, one of the things that I think ties in with this is giving the animal a chance to make the mistake and then be corrected for it. And it kind of along the same lines of self-discovery, in the horse world, for example, it might be you're trying to get a horse to stand still while you saddle it and you put a blanket on it. And one school of thought would be to just tie the animal up and restrain them to where they can't move, and then put the saddle blanket on them and the saddle on them. And then the other way is to allow them the freedom to move, and keep flogging them with the saddle blanket until they get tired of moving away from it. Pretty soon they'll stand still. And it's the philosophy of making the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. And you can apply that same type of logic with some of this dog training, and you can make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult, and apply that in your trash breaking. But going about it in a thoughtful way, I think definitely helps. And on the trash breaking side of things, ultimately, my goal is that I have dogs that I can free cast and I can trust, and I know they're not going to take off game, but yet I've selected dogs that are high enough drive and have the kind of personalities that they can put up with, maybe not seeing a lion every day or every week, but still be trainable enough that I don't have to worry about trash, but we can keep pushing on through a lot of it until we do find that lion track, and then that's where they get their joy.
Yeah. Nope. I get it. I'm with you. I'm working on it. That's where I'm a work in progress.
There you go. Yeah, we all are, if we're honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know you're in, I'm 5 years into a rebuilding phase, and the 5-year-old dogs are my older dogs. And then I've got the 3 coming on 4s and the 2s coming on 3s and the 1s coming on 2s. And, it's always something. I mean, it's always something with them.
Sure. Yeah. My rebuilding, I'm right there with you on that. I had a year or two of dogs that didn't work out, had some aggressiveness, had some other things that wasn't what I was looking for. And so my rebuild, I think my oldest dogs now are right in that 4-year-old range. And, it's a work in progress for sure, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on and having a conversation. Great conversation. Like I could go for another hour or two.
Sure.
But you got things to do, and it's way past my bedtime. That's for sure. So,
well, sounds good. Thanks for letting me pick your brain on some of this stuff. And, always enjoy the conversation.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we'll have many more. And for everybody else, Happy New Year, and I hope you have a great year.
Take care.
Do you like to be outdoors like I do? If so, unlock the wilderness with OnX Maps. It is your ultimate guide to exploring, hunting, and conquering the great outdoors. With detailed maps, real-time tracking, and exclusive access to public and private lands, OnX Maps is your key to adventure. Discover the possibilities and never get lost again with OnX. So subscribe today using the promo code K920, letter K, number 9, 20, and know where you stand.